back to EDH Deck Building. I'm your host, Demo, and it's time for more requested deck techs. I'm starting out this week with one of my patrons, Bruce M. He's actually my first patron, so thanks, Bruce. And he wants to see Kethis Super Friends. Obviously, Planeswalkers work really good with Kethis because they are legendary. So they're going to be one less to cast, and then when we use them up, we can sort of recycle them, as it were. Obviously, you're going to want Doubling Season, Peer of the Peer and Toothy partnership to go in this deck to sort of increase our Planeswalker loyalty abilities. I really like Chalet in this deck. This is a card that I thought, when I first saw Chalet, I thought, man, everyone's going to make a Chalet Super Friends deck, and they don't really. Like, this gives your Planeswalkers hexproof, which I think is really, really good. I mean, yeah, I guess that second ability sort of screams creatures, but I really like it just to give you and Planeswalkers you control hexproof. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of Planeswalkers you can go through. Anything in Abzan colors. I like ones that we're going to be minusing, right? Because I like that first minus ability, because that's the one we're going to use right away, because we sort of want them to go to the graveyard. I mean, we don't necessarily want our Planeswalkers to go to the graveyard, but we're definitely okay if they do. So I like Ajani Unyielding and Garruk Unleashed. Those are guys that first minus ability I like a lot, exile a creature. That's pretty good. And also because Ajani has those 4 loyalty counters, we can just exile a creature, and then the very next turn we exile one again. He goes to the graveyard, but we can use him from the graveyard, so that's okay. And Garruk Unleashed, again, has that minus ability that I think is useful, and also we can use his first minus twice before he goes to the graveyard, right? I would look for cards where they have that ratio where I can minus it twice before it dies, rather than a lot of them you can only minus them once before you let them go to the graveyard. I also like Garruk Cursed Huntsman. Again, just has a really good first minus. Destroy a creature and draw a card. And for me, I don't really play Planeswalkers, but if you play a Planeswalker, I'm thinking you want to get something really effective out of him right away, right? And I think, although 6 mana to destroy a creature and draw a card isn't great, it's not bad, So if we lose our Garruk right away, it's not the end of the world. I also like Gideon Jura in this one. Again, another minus ability that I think works really well. Just destroy target tap creature. We want to be defending our Planeswalkers, right? Also, the 0 ability is good because we do have to win the game, right? And having a couple of Gideons in the deck that we can turn into creatures and attack with is going to be good. I really like Kaya the Inexorable. Again, her first minus ability, exile target non-land permanent, is pretty fantastic. Also, her emblem's pretty fantastic. I think it works great in this deck if we can get there. You get an emblem with, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may cast a legendary spell from your hand, from your graveyard, or from among cards you own in exile without paying its mana cost. That it just fits this deck perfectly in so many ways. We got lots of legendary spells, right? We got legendary Planeswalkers all over the place. And also, Kethis' ability is going to exile, right? Kethis' second ability exiles legendary cards from our graveyard, so that will give us an opportunity to recast them. And then obviously you're going to have lots of legendary stuff. So Captain Sisay is going to be a superstar in this deck. She just goes and gets any Planeswalker out of your deck that you want. Reke, the History of Kamigawa. Again, every time we cast a legendary card, we get to draw a card. I like Search for Glory because it allows us to go get a Planeswalker. I really like Urza's Ruinous Blast and Primeval's Glorious Rebirth. These 2 cards, I think, I've never made a Super Friends deck before, but I'm just thinking if you're making one, these are auto-includes, both of them. And I also like Honor Worn Shaku. This, you're going to tap a legendary permanent to untap it, and so basically it's a mana boost, right? And all your Planeswalkers, they're just sitting there. You can tap them, untap them. It doesn't really matter either way, right? So you can just sit there. If you have 3 Planeswalkers in play, you can untap your Honor Worn Shaku 3 times. I mean, that seems pretty good. And then, of course, Baird, Steward of Argive. You want to have those Ghostly Prison type effects, but of course, as many people have learned the hard way, Ghostly Prison doesn't actually work with Planeswalkers. They can still attack your Planeswalkers. They don't have to pay the 2. So you need those newer revised effects, like with Baird, and also Baird's Legendary, which is relevant, where it is they have to pay to attack you or Planeswalkers. So just make sure when you put effects like that in, that it is those and not the other ones. And next up, I have some requests from people just comments that I've seen and some interesting requests, and a lot of them matched up really well. There's two decks here each that I thought matched really well with each other, and so it would be easier for me to sort of cover all of it at once. Alfredo Ferrara wanted to see General Jarkeld, very interesting, very old commander, with a very complicated, I mean, it's just a ridiculous mouthful. Try to stay focused for this. Choose to target blocked attacking creatures. If each of those creatures could be blocked by all creatures that the other is blocked by, each creature that's blocking exactly one of those attacking creatures stops blocking it and is blocking the other attacking creature. Activate this ability only during the declare blocker step. So, that's a mouthful. Sorrow's Path, I think, is the other card that does almost the exact same thing. Is a really bad card. I guess you could put it in this deck. I don't know if you'd want to, though, because this effect is going to be really hard to use already. So basically what you're doing is you have two attacking creatures, and they don't have to be yours. These can be your opponent's creatures. This is what maybe makes this deck interesting. You have to have two attacking creatures that are blocked in order for this ability to even do anything. You can't even use this ability unless there are two attacking creatures that are being blocked, both of them. And then basically you're just swapping them, right? You're swapping them so that they're being blocked by the other creature. All that other mumbo jumbo in there is basically just to say, okay, well, it has to be a legal block. You can't have some creature with Skulk that is blocked and then gets blocked by a creature with greater power, or a creature with flying that is blocked by a creature with flying and then is blocked by one that doesn't have flying. It just has to be a legal block in order for you to make the switch. So there is a lot of hoops to jump through. It's not a crazy powerful ability. However, I always like to throw out some ideas. Provoke is an interesting one, a long forgotten about ability. Forces blocks. So I think if you want to go down the road of forcing your opponents to block, that's always a good way to go. I know I'll throw Magnetic Web out there. Again, I've been using that card a lot lately. Just a great way to force blocks or force attacks. You could also force attacks with this card. So I think it works. It does double duty in this deck. Reconnaissance is a good one. Obviously you're going to be manipulating. This is going to be a lot of combat tricks and manipulating. And Reconnaissance is a one where you can basically save your creature. This is good in a lot of decks. And it's one that you can save your creatures with if you want to rearrange. I mean, there's going to be a lot of rearranging and pulling guys out of combat and stuff. Gustcloak Savior is another one that can pull a guy out of combat if you want to. I mean, obviously your opponent, they ultimately choose how to block, so you have no control over that. You can just affect it after the fact. And then we want to throw some creatures in there that we want to be blocked, right? I guess we want lots of blocking going on. So Grasping Giant is a good one that we want to be blocked. Stuffy Doll is another one that we want to be blocked. And this is a good one that we can swap with, right? Where our opponent is like, okay, well, I only want to deal your Stuffy Doll 2 damage, so I'll block it with my small guy. And then you go, and you switch, so it gets blocked by the bigger guy and they take more damage. Abu Jafar is probably the best card for this deck. This is the card that sort of was, you always come across the card that just seems to fit a commander perfectly. And Abu Jafar is that card. This is not a legendary creature, although it probably should be. When Abu Jafar dies, destroy all creatures blocking or blocked by it. They can't be regenerated. So basically you're going to want to force an attack because your opponent's not going to want to block this, right? So you got to use Magnetic Web or something else to force a block, and then you're going to swap, right? Then you're going to swap out to get the creature you want, because the opponent isn't going to block with the creature that they want to die. They're going to block with something that they don't care about, and then you can use General Jarkeld's ability to swap those creatures out. And when Abu Jafar dies, then that trigger goes on the stack, and the creature that was blocking it ends up getting destroyed. Quite certain that works. This is definitely not a deck for novices, because there's a lot of combat tricks and crazy things going on. Also, why not throw in something like Brigid, right? I think that if there's going to be a lot of attacking and blocking and being able to deal damage, right? That's something that white does really well, is dealing damage to attacking and blocking creatures. So Brigid is going to be great in this deck. Again, you're going to be a lot of manipulating and moving stuff around. And, since we're going old and since we're going wild, why not banding? I mean, banding is another one. If you want something that is really crazy and far out there, and you're doing a lot of these combat tricks, I think banding does work with this commander, because with banding, there's a lot of reassigning combat damage and stuff like that. So I think it works in the deck as well. Merlin C wanted to see a Sensei Golden-Tail, okay? And I thought, okay, that there's some similarities here, right? And this is why I did these two together. I thought Sensei Golden-Tail and General Jarkeld had some similarities between the decks, and you can use a lot of the cards from the General Jarkeld deck in the Sensei Golden-Tail deck, because I think you want to be forcing blocks a little bit. Maybe, I mean, that's one of the directions you can go with it, right? So Sensei Golden-Tail is a samurai, Fox Samurai, and he's got Bushido 1, and he has a very unique ability of you tap him to put a training counter on target creature. That creature gains Bushido 1 and becomes a samurai. So there's two things going on there. You're making a creature into a samurai, and you're making a creature have Bushido 1. So I think the Bushido 1, because Bushido 1 wants you to be blocking or be blocked, that's why I think some of those, forcing block type cards maybe work with Sensei Golden-Tail. Just an idea. I mean, obviously there's not much to work with here. This isn't a samurai tribal deck, right? Because you don't want to be giving Bushido to samurais that already have it. That's to me doesn't seem very useful at all. So some of the things we can do is we can make our creatures into samurais and then give them effects that pump samurais. So Call to Glory or Indebted Samurai. These are cards that are going to benefit from us having other samurais. Not super great, but they do work. Nagao and Takino, again, cards that are going to benefit from having samurais or are going to benefit our samurais, right? So the idea I'm thinking here is we have creatures in white that we want to put in our deck, and then we make them into samurais so that they gain the benefits from these other cards. There's also other things you can do, like giving Bushido. I was thinking, why would we want to give Bushido to something? So you think of a card like Bushi Tenderfoot. Whenever a creature dealt damage by Bushi Tenderfoot dies this turn, flip Bushi Tenderfoot. And the other side is fantastic, right? Double strike, Bushido 2, 3, 4. That's really good. So if it becomes blocked, it's a 5/6 with double strike. I mean, that's a really good creature on the other side, but it's really hard to flip. And I think giving it Bushido 1 helps, because now if you block a 1/1 or a 1/1 blocks your Bushi Tenderfoot, it'll get +1/+1 and become a 2/2. It'll kill it and it won't die. Again, not fantastic, but at least it works. It does do something. And then you could also use double strike, right? +1/+1 isn't great unless a card has double strike, and then of course the double strike becomes twice as good. So Adorned Pouncer, Mirran Crusader, those are cards that you could give Bushido to, and all of a sudden the +1/+1 essentially becomes +2/+2. Just another direction you could go. Again, I'm thinking, okay, we're doing two things here. We're giving creatures Bushido 1, and we're making them into samurais. So let's try to take advantage of both of those. So I would maybe just say, okay, make a good stuff white creature deck and just turn them into samurais and try to benefit from it. The other two decks that I heard suggested that I'm going to do together are Lord of Tresserhorn and Yusova Dragonclaw. I had both of these decks in the past, took them both apart, and I will get to why that is. For the same reason, and because the decks were doing the same thing. So for me, a Lord of Tresserhorn deck, and again, this is a deck that back in the day, a lot of nostalgia for me. I just thought when I first saw it, it was one of those cards that really wows you when you first see it, right? So it's a 1, a blue, a black, and a red, legendary creature zombie, and it's a 10/4. Hoo-wee. And it has Regenerate. However, when Lord of Tresserhorn enters the battlefield, you lose 2 life, sacrifice 2 creature, and target opponent draws 2 cards. Yikes. So I was trying to figure a way. This is way back when I first started playing Commander. This is one of the ones I was trying to figure out how to make a good deck with it. And I thought, okay, well, we're forcing our opponent to draw cards. Maybe we could put Underworld Dreams in there. And you definitely could do that. I think Underworld Dreams is a card that you could put in any deck and it'd be good. But I went more with the sacrifice 2 creatures thing, because I thought, okay, I can steal my opponent's creatures and then play my Lord of Tresserhorn and sacrifice their creatures to the effect. That's the deck I went with, and that's why it is so similar to the Yusova Dragonclaw deck. So I didn't want to just be sacrificing creatures. I didn't love that. I thought, there's already a lot of decks that do that. And I had just seen the card Induced Amnesia. I think it had just come out. And I was like, man, there's got to be a good way to use that. Okay, it comes into the battlefield and target player exiles all cards from his or her hand face down. Obviously, that's going to be you. You're going to exile your hand face down and then draw that many cards. So let's say you have 5 cards in hand, right? You exile your hand face down and draw 5 cards. Then when it is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you return the cards to your hand. So you have to make sure this is sacrificed. You can't risk it getting bounced or exiled or anything. So I basically thought, okay, well, if we're going to be sacking a bunch of stuff anyway, why not put enchantments, all sorts of stuff in there that we want to be sacrificing? And instead of just sacrificing creature, I'm going to go with a sacrifice permanent sort of theme. And Hatching Plans, that's a another card that I want to be sacrificing. There's actually quite a few cards like this. Ugin's Nexus is one that you want to be sacrificing, right? You want it to go to the graveyard so you can get that effect. And then I just put lots of cards like Read the Runes and Perilous Research in there, stuff that I can sacrifice permanence specifically with. Infernal Tribute is another one that I can sack a permanent with. Baron Master Wizard is a really good one, right? And again, remember, we're stealing people's stuff, right? So I can steal someone's creature, sacrifice that person's creature to Baron, and then bounce another creature with it, right? Blood Aspirant is another one. This is a newer card. A lot of these cards didn't exist when I made this deck, and so this deck's gotten a lot better. Blood Aspirant wants us to be sacrificing stuff and can also sacrifice stuff. Mayhem Devil and Havoc Jester also. There's lots of these cards now that fit great in this deck because we're going to be doing a lot of sacrificing, so we might as well do that too. I really like Helm of Possession in this deck because we can steal someone's creature with a temporary effect like an Act of Treason and then sacrifice it to go steal another creature. And Fade Away. This is the deck, I think I talked about this in one of my 10 cards videos. This is the deck I had Fade Away in because I would cast something like a Reigns of Power, gain control of all my opponent's creatures, cast Fade Away, and I just wouldn't pay, right? I wouldn't pay the one, and I would sacrifice whatever all the creatures, I'd sacrifice whatever I want. And it was also just a way, if I had an Induced Amnesia or a Hatching Plans in play, it was a way for me to I'll forego paying the one and sacrifice my Hatching Plans, right? Because you can sacrifice any permanent to your Fade Away. And then my Yusova deck was very similar. I had a very similar theme, right? So a lot of those cards transfer over. And again, that's why I'm doing these sort of together, right? A lot of the cards, the stealing and the sacrificing stuff works well in the Yusova deck. Obviously not the black stuff, but everything else. I also had Reweave in my Yusova deck. Reweave works really good. And you got to be careful with this, right? A Chaos Warp effect won't work. If you steal someone's thing and then Chaos Warp it, it's owner. So they're going to get to flip something off the top, not you. Reweave, though, is controller, right? Target permanent's controller sacrifices it. That player reveals cards from the top of their library, right? So you can steal your opponent's creature and then reweave it, and then you get to flip a creature off the top, or an enchantment, or a whatever hat you happen to steal, right? I also really like Synod's Sanctum in Yusova because, again, the wording is really important here. Okay, a lot of these blink effects, they go back into play under their owner's control. Synod Sanctum does not, right? Synod Sanctum, you exile target permanent you control. And again, this is a permanent, not just a creature, so you can use this with anything. And then you're going to sacrifice it and return all cards exiled with it to the battlefield under your control. So if you steal your opponent's stuff and then exile it, right? If it's a temporary, like Yusova's ability, you're going to temporarily steal something and then exile it, then it's going to come back and you permanently gain control of it. And the card that I think works great in every Yusova deck and also has a very cool and unusual name is Skits Motivate. All right, Skits Motivate. And this is where the idea I went with Yusova when I first made it was, okay, well, her power is only 4. What if we want to steal a big creature? And I thought, don't we want to be either minusing our opponent's creature's power or plussing our creature's power? And Skits Motivate does both. Target creature gets +4, +0 until end of turn. That's going to be our Yusova. And then our target, the creature we want to steal, is going to get -4. -0 until end of turn. So this can steal a really big creature because our Yusova is going to get a power of 8 all of a sudden. It's going to be an 8/2. And then our opponent's Ulamog, let's say, that we want to steal, is now going to be a 6/10. So now Yusova's power is greater, and now we can steal their Ulamog, attack with it, we can swing with it, and then sacrifice it before they get it back. So Skits Motivate is just a great card in any Yusova deck, and I think that any of these effects, and there's more effects like this that are going to -4, -0, or -X, -0 your opponent's creatures. People should definitely look at that kind of stuff when making a deck like that. So these two decks are very similar, where they're stealing people's creatures and sacrificing them, or even stealing people's permanents and sacrificing them, or permanently stealing them. And that's why I took them both apart. People just don't like that, I find. There's a couple of strategies in Commander that people really don't like, even casual. Stealing people's stuff is definitely a casual strategy that I don't think anyone would disagree with that. It's same with milling. Milling is for sure a casual strategy, and I don't think I've ever seen anyone win a 4-player game with a mill deck, but yet for some reason everyone hates it, right? Everyone always gangs up on the mill deck because they hate being milled. You know, stealing is another strategy that people just seem to really not like, and it makes you a target super, super fast. As soon as you start stealing people's creatures and sacrificing them, oh man, that rubs them the wrong way. Even though both of these decks were super fun to play and I liked them a lot, I ended up taking apart both of them for that reason, just because it really seemed to piss people off and make me a target. So just be careful with that. But that is it for today. More requested deck techs. Again, if you're a patron, I'm going to basically give you priority with regards to these things. And then, you know, I'll sort of fill in the other gaps with ideas that I see that I think are interesting and that I actually want to throw out some ideas for. If you want to become a patron, check out my Patreon. The link is in the description below. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.